Hey, hi, hello friends, what is up? Long time no chat. It has been a hot minute since I have made a video for BookTube, so apologies for that. I have had a lot going on in my personal life, lots of changes. I moved. I've attended a lot of book events or bookish events. I have been trying to keep myself sane, and yeah, I am just trying to survive at this point. But it's a new year, it's 2025, and I feel like it's time for us to start fresh. I said it last year that I was going to post a lot in 2024, and then that didn't happen. So we're fixing it. We're gonna try again. Why not? There's nothing stopping me. So I thought I would get the year started by going over some of my favorite reads of 2024 and also going through the books I said that I was really anticipating last year. So let's get started. So my goal for 2024 was to read 200 books. Actually, I think originally I set it to 250, and after the first like 2 months into the year, I was like, that's never gonna happen. So I lowered it to 200. That was still a pipe dream because there was no way I was gonna read 200 books. I did end up reading 137 books though, which is not a number to scoff at. That's a lot of books to read. So out of that 137 books, I mostly read 4- and 5-star books. Like, pretty typical for me. I don't tend to finish books I don't enjoy. So I thought I'd go through month by month and talk about which books were my favorites from every month. I'll talk about my top book of every month, and then some other notable ones that were really close to also getting the top spot. So for January, I picked Powerless as my top book of the month. I had such a good time with that book. I know that a lot of people didn't like Powerless and they were like, oh, it's a Hunger Games knockoff, but I personally had a really good time. I loved the romance. It was YA. It was very YA. There's a lot of dagger to the throat, will they, won't they, which honestly I eat up. I eat up a slow burn. It was also cool because I got to meet Lauren Roberts last year, so that was pretty awesome. I got to have Powerless, Powerful, the novella, and Reckless signed by her, and then I took a picture with her. It was really great. I had a good time. It's like Hunger Games-esque, but like if she was Sean Spencer from Psych, which I love. The other book that was battling out Powerless for the top spot for January was Nobody's Darling by Sarah Blue, which I already knew I was gonna like. It's Sarah Blue, it's Omegaverse, it's Motorcycle Club. There was nothing I wasn't gonna like about it, but I just felt like Powerless was a surprising pick, and I already knew that Sarah Blue was going to take up other spots later in the year. So moving on, in February I had 2 favorite books. The first one was Beta by M.T. Zimney. You don't understand how transformative reading this series is to me. So M.T. Zimney and I have actually become friends, and we became friends because I moderated a panel she was on, and she has a completed trilogy called The Apex Cycle, and Beta is the first book. If you like YA books with like superheroes, but like don't think like the Avengers, think more like biological magic, because that's more along the lines of what it is. It takes place in a like pseudo Pacific Northwest kind of area on a man-made island, and our main character Sammy is going to a boarding school. She's starting at a boarding school on this man-made island for high school, and her roommate, who was one of her childhood friends, gets kidnapped by supervillains, and she feels like super guilty about this because she was there and couldn't save her, and so she decides that she's gonna join the super secret superhero team at her high school, even though she doesn't have superpowers. So there goes a bunch of events that lead to Sammy getting her butt handed to her, but it is such a good story. There's so much angst. It's so fun, and you will not guess the twist. You will not. I didn't know what was gonna happen. It was absolutely mind-boggling. It was so good. So definitely recommend. I didn't really mean to give a full review about this, but like, it's so good. And then I also this year went off and cosplayed as a Apex, which is the name of like the superheroes, like if you have superpowers. But there's like an Apex team, which is the superhero team at the high school. Anyways, I ended up cosplaying as an Apex team member alongside MT Zimney. We attended many an event with that cosplay. And also, just a little sidebar, there's also a like Viking element to these books that you will never ever understand if you don't read it. So you have to do it. That's your assignment. You have to figure it out. Why are there Vikings? I'm not going to tell you. That's for you to find out. The other notable book for February was Iron Flame. And let me tell you, I am so glad that I read Iron Flame when I did, because I attended Emerald City Comic Con and I got to meet Rebecca Yarros. And if I had not read her book, I would have been so upset because this lady just spoiled the plot during her panels. I was like, is everyone hearing this? I literally finished the book the day before the event. If I had not read the book, I would have been so upset because she spoiled everything. But it's fine, I did. I finished the book. I made cutie little charms, like book charms to put on bracelets that I gave to Rebecca and my friends and people I met while walking around Comic-Con. It was really fun. So anyways, those are my two picks for February. Now for March, I read a lot of good books in March, which is not surprising, but like I feel like there were months where I had a hard time picking my top book, and then there were months where I had a really easy time picking my favorite book. March was not an easy pick. March was very difficult. I had so many good books read. My top book for March was The Blood Trials by N.E. Davenport. I cannot tell you how lovely this book was. Lovely in a horrible way. I love a magical yet sci-fi combined story where there are of course trials, and there's someone trying to kill somebody. There's someone trying to make someone else's life miserable. There's a mystery that's being solved. There's a tense romance part to it that I just like ate up. And there's of course the like, can I trust you? I can't tell if I can trust you because you're supposed to be my enemy. So good. It was so good. So good. The other books I read in March that I loved, and I'm actually like very sad I couldn't pick multiple favorite books. I mean, I can, but like for the sake of picking a number one, it was The Blood Trials. However, I also read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I read You with a View by Jessica Joyce. And I read A House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas, which I know is a hot take, but I really enjoyed House of Flame and Shadow. Were there issues? Yes. But did I enjoy the story? Also yes. Yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. Moving on to April. My favorite book I read in April was Not a Trace. This is kind of a cheat because there's two books. It's it's not a duology, but it's a duet, meaning that like there are two books that tell one story, but they're just broken up into two books, but they don't have like their own plot for each. It's like you could smash them together and it would make one story. Anyways, Not a Trace by Liliana Carlisle. So good. Oh my god. I discovered Liliana Carlisle through a Facebook group. It was some Omegaverse book, and she posted, hey, does anybody want to read an arc of part 2 of my Omegaverse? And I said, me. And then she said, have you read the first part? I said, no, I'll read it tonight. I literally read it in one evening, and I messaged her the next day and I was like, hey bestie, I loved it. I'm ready for the arc. And that was that. April overall was a huge Omegaverse month for me. I just took a nosedive directly into anything Omegaverse. So in addition to Not a Trace by Liliana Carlisle, I also read Alpha Inmate by Liliana Carlisle, which is like kind of what it sounds like. It's a Omegaverse where the Omega is working at a criminal facility, and the Alpha that she is sent matched to is a murderer. And it's really good. It's very dark. Not the romance. The romance is very sweet, but there are a lot of dark themes in the book itself. So check your warnings. check your content, make sure you're good with that, but it is so good. In addition, I also discovered the Omegaverse written by Serena Song. So this is specifically the Naughty Pines series, which includes like Catch Me, and I think the second book has Come Back for Me. I can't remember, but they are so good. These were books that were recommended to me in my like challenge from friends, and it was so good. I devoured the entire series, and I just couldn't get enough. I just couldn't get enough. It was so good. So if you're looking for new Omegaverse, check out Serena Song, because you will not be disappointed. They're so good. Moving on to my May picks. My favorite book for May was Delta by M.T. Zimney. I know, shocking, shocking, I tell you. I think that book 2 is even better than book 1 because there's even more drama. There's even more angst. There's even more at stake. You get backstory that you don't from book 1. It is so good. It's so well written. I literally sent a video. Was it a video? It might have been a photo. I literally sent M.T. Zimney a photo of me crying my little eyeballs out while reading the ending of book 2. So this is your sign to read The Apex Cycle by M.T. Zimney. You won't regret it. You won't regret it. Other notable favorites for May include Wendy Darling by Rebecca F. Kenney and the second half of that story, which is Captain Pan. I love a Peter Pan retelling, and these books did not disappoint. I think they are so fun. It's what happened after Wendy grows up and can't get Neverland out of her mind. She can't get Peter Pan out of her mind, and she wants nothing but to go back. She has been thinking about Neverland and her time there for like 10 years. And she finally gets to go back for reasons. And it's so good. I loved it. I had such a fun time reading. I was actually recommended this book by Mia Battaglia. I think that's her name. I found her on TikTok, and she actually wrote her own Peter Pan retelling, which is on my list to read for 2025. I'm excited. Another book I loved from May was House of Roots and Ruin by Erin A. Craig. I was okay with House of Salt and Sorrow. I don't know if I didn't love that book because it was like, I had expectations of what it would be about, and I didn't realize it was a retelling of sorts. I thought there was gonna be like mermaids or something, and that's not at all it. It was like gothic horror fantasy kind of vibes. It just happened to take place by the ocean. I didn't know that, so I was taken aback by that book. Plus there was some body horror that was really shocking to me, and I did not enjoy that. However, the second book shook. Absolutely shook. I was not anticipating where that was going. I did not realize that what happened, and the ending is so good. Oh, I think about it on a daily basis. Other good books I read in May include Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I tell you, I ate this book up. I ate this duology up. It was so good. I cried my little eyeballs out. I was very invested in their stories. There were parts that I was like their romance in the beginning, I was like, do I buy this? I don't know. I buy it by the end. By the end, I was hooked. So take with that what you will. I think about those books on a daily basis. I wonder what they're doing right now. They're probably not with us anymore because it's a historical. Anyway, it got dark real quickly. The last book I want to talk about for May was The Honey Witch. It was so cute. I don't know where I thought the story was gonna go. That wasn't it, and I loved it. I loved every moment. It was a bit of a slow start, which it took me longer to read than I planned, but I loved it. I had the greatest time reading it. Highly recommend any of those books for May. Favorite books for June. This one really surprised me because I didn't plan to read this. I just kept seeing it online, and I was really excited to give it a go. I couldn't foresee a reason why I shouldn't. I love a romantasy. It was compared a bit to Throne of Glass vibes, which, yeah, good shit. So my favorite read for June was Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. It was such a good story. I can't even get into it. I probably will have to reread it before I get into the other parts of the trilogy, because there's no way that I'm gonna remember all the details, but I just remember being completely obsessed. Anyway, the other books that I wanted to mention that I read in June include Good Girls Don't Die by Christina Henry. What is that movie? Don't Worry, Darling, with Florence Pugh and Harry Styles. Ring any bells? I recently watched that, and this is a very good comp title if you liked that movie. It's technically like a thriller, and it follows 3 women who are seemingly not connected. You'll have to find out what's going on with them, because their stories are wild. So I highly recommend this book. I met Christina Henry 2 years ago, technically. I think I met her at the end of, or in November of 2023. I love her books, so I had high hopes, and I really loved Good Girls Don't Die. It's so good. I need you all to read it. I need you all to read it. I need you to tell me what you think of it. And the last book that I want to mention for June was Forget Your Morals by Sarah Blue. It should surprise nobody that a Sarah Blue book once again makes the list, because Sarah Blue writes incredible books. And this one is a contemporary, and it's very taboo. And she got a lot of flack for it online leading up to its release. But fortunately, it blew up on TikTok, and it deserved it, because the book is so good. It's so well written, and honestly, I absolutely need to know what happens with the last Carlson brothers. Moving on to July. My favorite book from July was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I ate up this book. I'm always a little hesitant to read a contemporary romance. I feel like in the beginning of reading romance a couple years ago, I read a lot of romance that was good but not my favorite, and so I've been a little hesitant to pick up rom-coms in recent years if they're not by someone that I know is gonna write a good book. This book was so good. I devoured it. I laughed, I cried. I had a genuinely good time. And then I went on to read Yours Truly and Just for the Summer, also by Abby Jimenez, also part of this interconnected standalone trilogy. So good. Those are also included in my favorite books for July. They're so good. Again, you laugh, you cry, you think, why can't men be like that in real life? Ugh, those books hit so hard. So highly recommend. Highly recommend. Other books I loved in July include One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I can't believe it took me this long to read One Dark Window, because it had been sitting on my TBR for ages. Ages, I tell you. And I just simply couldn't get enough. I read that book so fast, and I was salivating. Who am I now? The magic system is so unique. It's so fun. It's so, creepy, but yet not scary. And nothing, this is in English. I just can't even speak. I just love it so much. I love it so much. Another book I loved in July includes The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. I'm not a litfic girly, but this book was litfic with little magical-esque elements. I was not prepared for how much I would love this book. The last book I'm going to talk about from July is Beautiful Villain by Rebecca F. Kenny. This is Great Gatsby with vampires, and I don't know if I need to say more. Done. So good. Moving on to August. My top book from August was Puck Around and Find Out by Sarah Blue. It's the third book in the Pucking Around. It's an Omegaverse. I don't remember what the series is called, but it's the third book in an interconnected standalone Omegaverse series that centers around hockey, and it was so good. It was so good. Isn't it so good, Ronald? He's just a boy. Oh, he's just a boy. He's like, Mother, you embarrassed me. Puck Around and Find Out was such a good book. I had the best time reading it. It's an Omegaverse. It has hockey. It's Why Choose. There's a mascot who's one of the love interests. There's a rivalry between the two alphas. I'm really not seeing the problem here, but they're so much fun. And, ooh, Sarah can write a good Omegaverse. That's all I gotta say. if you're looking for Omegaverse, start with Sarah Blue. Speaking of Omegaverse, the other two books that I really, really loved from August were also Omegaverses. So Alpha Ruined was one of them by Liliana Carlisle. It's a interconnected standalone that's connected to Alpha Inmate. So again, darker themes, sweet romance. It actually went kind of viral at one point during the year because Liliana made videos about how like he's obsessed with her, but he like breaks into her house to fill up her fridge with food. And I just highly recommend that you read it. It's just a good time. The other Omegaverse that I would like to mention is Not Giving Up by Thea Mason and Jenny Peck. This is a duology, or like a duet, and it is a sports romance Omegaverse, but not hockey. It is a water polo centered around the Olympics. So I didn't know I needed that, but I did, and it was so good. I had the best time. Moving on to September. September was another month of many amazing reads. So I had a really hard time picking my favorite read, but at the same time, there was one that stood out just slightly above all the rest. And that was The Marriage Hex by none other than Sarah Blue. This ended up being my top book of the entire year if I had to pick one. This is a witch and a werewolf romance with nodding and a whole bunch of like family mysteries and just other elements that I can't talk about without spoiling. But if you haven't read it yet, you absolutely should because it's so good. I just love everything written by Sarah. I just love it. Yeah, this is my favorite book of the entire year. I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I'm very excited for future interconnected standalones. Other books that I loved in September include The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song. This is a Mulan romantasy retelling. There's a love triangle in it, which I don't usually love love triangles, but trust me, this love triangle will do something to your brain chemistry. It's so good. I also loved The Wren in the Holly Library by K.A. Lind. This is like post-apocalyptic, like if monsters came out of hiding and have kind of taken over the world, but like humans and monsters are like having to live together now, and like there's a monster treaty of how like humans and monsters can interact, and our main character ends up on a heist where she's basically breaking the monster treaty. There were so many elements that I didn't expect. I thought the romance elements were so cleverly done. The magic was unique. The whole story felt fresh, and I had a really, really good time reading it. Another book I loved in September was Apprentice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer, however you say her last name. I loved it so much. I think that it's like The Office meets fantasy elements, but like just cleverly done humor and fun banter. And even though there's like the villain is throwing people off of the building, somehow you're like, it doesn't feel scary. It's like done in a way that you just like, you're like, oh yeah, just a normal day in the office. I don't know how she does it, but it's such a pleasure to read. And even though it's like a little bit slow in the beginning, especially, well, the middle, it's a second book. That happens sometimes, but it altered my brain chemistry. Highly recommend these books if you want a funny fantasy with romance. I also read the second part of the Shepherd King duology. So I read Two Twisted Crowns in September, and holy gosh, I'm in love with Elm. I loved Raven as well, and I loved The Nightmare, but like Elm, my whole heart. I loved this book. It was so fun and just had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. So I highly recommend you read that duology if you haven't already. If you haven't already, what are you doing? Go get it now. I also had a surprising pick that I didn't know if I would love or not. It'd been one that I'd seen at Barnes & Noble a few times, but I ended up picking it up because I was participating in a panel. I was moderating a panel, and this was an author on the panel, and so I finally had an excuse to read the book. And this is Luxuria, I think that's how you say it, by Colette Rhodes. This is a like shadow monster, arranged marriage, enemies to lover monster romance, and oh my god, I read the entire series of what was out at that time in like a week, less than a week. I ate it up. It was like the hit from Ice Planet Barbarians. Like, it had the same kind of like just cotton candy. You just want to devour it in globs. I'm doing a poor job of explaining this, but it was so good. It was so good. All of the books were amazing. They were all hilarious. There was that element of like, there's a cultural difference between the humans and the monsters. So like sometimes things get lost in translation and like, like what do I do with that? And it was so good. Oh, I have to read the last 2 books that came out in the series still, but I highly recommend you pick that up if you are at all a monster romance girly. Even if you're not, I've had friends who were not monster romance girlies who've read it and they also had a good time with it. Just saying, these monsters aren't like super crazy other than they're like shadow monsters. Highly recommend. The last 2 books I want to talk about from September, I know, last 2, Haley, this is a long list. This was just a really good reading month for me, okay? It was really hard to pick my favorite. The last 2 are both YA. So the first one is Under the Surface by Diana Urban, which is about a girl who goes on a class trip to France and she and some friends go to a party in the catacombs and they get lost and chaos ensues. And there's a boy who really likes the main character and he has the only one that's really like kind of has an idea of what's going on, and so he's trying to help authorities and the adults try to like find her and the friends. And oh, I was both incredibly creeped out and also very moved, and I felt like even though it is a YA, it was very relatable and it was so much fun to read. Also, as someone who's gone to the Paris catacombs, like in my brain I could easily picture how freaking creepy this was, and I would have literally not survived. If it had been me, I would not have survived. The last book I want to talk about for September, Us in Ruins, which if you think about it, it's kind of like a YA version of The Mummy, but if it took place in a dig site, an archaeological dig site in Pompeii. I think it was Pompeii. It's been a while. It's not September anymore. It's now January, but I'm pretty sure it was a Pompeii dig site, and it's like a self-discovery story, a little bit of romance, and a whole lot of fun to read. I had the best time. Truly I did. It was one of those books that I saw in a reel or a TikTok, and it was like the main premise is that this girl is on this archaeological dig site and she accidentally like awakens a statue, and she's like, what do you mean? But the statue actually turns out to have been this archaeologist from like 100 years ago who she was obsessed with because she was reading his journal, his like research journal, which had some of his like personal thoughts in it. But like she was reading his research journal and she was obsessed with him, and then she ends up waking up his statue because he got cursed. He got cursed and turned into a statue for like 100 years. And then of course they're trying to break the curse, and that's what the book is about. And it is so good. Highly recommend. I swear I'm almost done. Now for my October picks. My favorite book in October was Valley by Stacey McEwen. I'm sure that's a shock to literally nobody, but the end of the Galatian trilogy was better than I could have ever imagined. If I put Ledge and Valley side by side, I don't know if I would have ever imagined how we got from point A to point B with all the steps in the middle. I don't know if I would ever have imagined that, but that's how cleverly done it was. Did I say that right? It was well done. That's what I'm trying to say. I also had the lovely opportunity of meeting Stacey in October. She is an angel baby human and I love her so much, and I got to give her a hug, and I will cherish this memory. I love her so much, and I loved her books. The other 2 books I loved in October include Dark Shores by Danielle L. Jensen. This has been on my list for a while because obviously I picked up The Bridge Kingdom and such in past years, and I kind of just wanted to read Danielle's backlist, and I finally had the opportunity to read Dark Shores, and I was blown away at how good it was. It had me on the edge of my seat. The last book for October was The Third Gilmore by Kelly Bishop. I cried. I cried, especially when she started talking about Gilmore Girls and how that impacted her life and all of the things she went through. And I don't know if I knew all this about her. And I mean, why would I? That's what the memoir is for. And it was just so amazing. And if you're looking for a memoir, especially one where the audiobook is read by the author, highly recommend The Third Gilmore. I think is it The Third Gilmore or Third Gilmore Girl? You should read it. My favorite book for November was, unsurprisingly, the official Eras Tour book by Taylor Swift. I'm counting it. I don't care. It was so good. I loved seeing all the behind the scenes photos. I loved reading all the little bits that Taylor wrote. I was just happy to have something tangible to commemorate that tour with. The Eras tour was a huge part of my year, my last 2 years, even though I only went to one show and I went to it in 2023. Grainy live stream every couple of days. I spent so much time watching the Eras tour this year and I have no regrets. So anyways, that was my favorite book for November. I also loved reading Not a Good Idea by Liliana Carlisle, which is not a spin-off, but it's a interconnected book to Not a Trace, and I loved it. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. Liliana Carlisle can do no wrong. Anyway, the third and final book that I want to talk about for November was A Reign of Rose by Kate Golden, which is the third and final book in the Sacred Stones trilogy. A Reign of Rose just took my breath away. I can't sing its praises enough. So if you're looking for a completed romantasy trilogy, read the Sacred Stones. That's all I gotta say. Finally, we have December. My favorite book for December was The X-Vows. I wasn't at all surprised because I loved You with a View, and actually I feel bad because I had an arc of The X-Vows, but as I said before, this past year was very, very hard, and I just simply ran out of time. I didn't have time to read it. I finally got around to reading it in December, and I cried. It was everything. It's so romantic. It's so devastating. I don't know if Jessica Joyce is capable of writing a book that doesn't make me want to sob my eyeballs out, but you know what? I love her dearly for it. Highly recommend The X-Vows by Jessica Joyce. Other books of note that I read in December include Beneath These Cursed Stars by Lexi Ryan, which is a first book in another duology that follows these hollow vows and these twisted thrones? These twisted bonds. I was close, it's right behind me. But it's about the sister of the main character from the first duology and her struggles. I read a lot of mental health books this past couple months. Not mental health books, but like books that heavily dealt with mental health as a theme. So good. I don't think I gave it 5 stars because it was a bit slow, but that cliffhanger ending, I'm unwell. I need to know what happens immediately. I'm chomping at the bit. And last but not least, Jolly Cupid by, you guessed it, Sarah Blue. That was another book I loved. So yeah, that sums up my reading. I think I will actually make a separate video about what books from my highly anticipated reads I did or didn't read. I'll have to do that in a separate video because this took a lot longer than I planned. Stay tuned for way more content this year. I'm still planning on editing up a whole bunch of vlogs that I started recording for 2023 and 2024. I have a lot of content to catch up on now that I have a little more time and a little less stress. I also am hoping to do some weekly vlogs. Whether or not it'll happen every week or every couple of weeks or maybe once a month. We'll see. We'll see. I will gauge how difficult it is for me to balance that with other things in my life. So I don't want to promise anything, but just know that I plan on vlogging things moving forward, and I plan on getting back to some things that I vlogged. I am much more competent at editing now than I was before, and I'm also very excited. I'm excited to share things again. So that's all. I hope you guys have a lovely day. I hope you guys have enjoyed New Year's. I hope you're gonna have the best reading year of your life, the best year of your life. You're gonna get the promotion that you're looking for. You're gonna read all the books that you hope to on your TBR. You're gonna meet your favorite author. You're gonna not be disappointed by any upcoming releases. It's just gonna be a great year for us all. We're gonna get Taylor's version for Reputation. Come on. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and leave me a comment. Tag me if you watch this and you post it on your stories. I love seeing that. Bye, friends.